It was just another ordinary Tuesday morning when I walked out of my apartment to pick up the groceries I needed. As I stood at the corner of 5th and Pine, the sudden whoop of a siren sliced through the air. I looked over my shoulder, my heart immediately sinking. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. There were 2 squad cars parked across the street. I had been around this neighborhood for years, and despite the usual glances from some folks, I'd never had trouble with the law. That is, until that day. "Hey, you! Old man, step over here," one of the officers yelled from his car, a harsh edge to his voice. My gut twisted. I didn't even have time to react before they were out of the car, marching toward me like I had committed some crime just by existing. "What's going on, officer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I wasn't naive enough to know I didn't stand a chance if things went sideways. "You don't need to know, just step aside," another cop barked. His tone, colder than the early morning breeze, made me tense. I felt my heart start to race. As an elderly man, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just trying to get by, keep my head down. But there they were, 2 officers blocking my path like I was some kind of threat. "Why are you stopping me?" "I haven't done anything wrong," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The first cop, with a name tag that read Thompson, ignored my question and grabbed my arm. "You're coming with us," he said, his grip tightening. The way he said it, I felt my insides knot. There was no reason, none at all, for them to arrest me. "Hold on now," I protested, yanking my arm free. "I'm not going anywhere without a reason." But before I could say another word, Officer Thompson shoved me forward, and the other cop, Officer Martinez, grabbed my shoulders to keep me in place. I tried to step back, but they were too strong, too determined. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, but my words were swallowed by the rush of traffic and the city sounds around us. They didn't answer me. They just kept pushing. They started cuffing me, rude and abrupt, as if I were some hardened criminal. My knees buckled slightly as they yanked my arms behind me, and I couldn't help but feel the sting of humiliation. A part of me wanted to cry out in anger, but another part of me knew better. I knew this wasn't the first time a black man had been wrongly treated like this. But I also knew it wouldn't be the last unless something changed. I was just the one unlucky enough to be standing here today. As they shoved me into the back of the squad car, I could hear whispers. "Old guy's just getting out of hand. Think he's above the law." That stung, but I refused to show it. I just sat there, trying to hold on to my dignity. At the precinct, they pushed me into an interrogation room and told me to sit. "Don't move," Thompson said with a sneer. I sat there, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on me. There had to be a way out of this. I couldn't let this be my fate, not after everything I'd been through. A few minutes later, Martinez came back in. "You know, you're making this a lot harder on yourself," he said, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes were filled with condescension. "You're going to be booked, and we're going to make sure you don't get out anytime soon." I glanced at him, the anger bubbling inside me. This wasn't right. They were going to use this to make a point. They were trying to make an example out of me. But I wasn't going to let them. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had never thought I'd have to call. I didn't have a lawyer, but I knew one person who could get things moving, the one person who could make sure this didn't end with me in a jail cell. It rang once, twice, and then the calm, collected voice I had hoped for answered, "This is Justice Brown." "Justice Brown, I need your help." "It's me, Marcus. I'm being arrested for no reason." "I need you to make a call," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. I wasn't afraid anymore. "Not now." "Hold on, Marcus. I'll make this right." "You're not alone," she said, calm as always. "Give me a moment." There was a brief pause. I could hear the shuffle of papers in the background, the hum of the courthouse. I felt a rush of hope surge through me. I'd been around long enough to know that when Justice Brown said she'd make a call, she meant it. Minutes later, the door to the room opened. Thompson and Martinez stepped inside, their faces a little less sure of themselves than before. "You know," Thompson said, his voice tighter than before, "you should have just stayed out of it. You wouldn't be in this mess." I didn't respond. I just stared back at him. I'd had enough. The silence was interrupted by a sharp knock. The precinct officer stepped in, holding a piece of paper. "Sir," he said, his voice much softer than before. "There's been an order from the Supreme Court. You're to be released immediately." "What?" Martinez stammered, his eyes wide. "The Supreme Court. How?" "It's over," the officer said, his voice now nervous. "You're free to go. Your charges have been dropped." I stood up slowly, my mind racing. It took a moment for it to sink in. The realization that I was going to walk out of here, that I wasn't going to be just another statistic. I wasn't going to be the victim of systemic racism. Not today. Before I could say another word, I was escorted out of the room, into the hallway, and back into the light of the outside world. As I walked out of the building, I couldn't help but glance up at the sky. A weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying seemed to lift. It wasn't over yet, though. It wasn't over for me or anyone else who had to face this kind of injustice every day. But I'd learned something in that dark room. There were people who cared. There were people who would fight. And for once, I wasn't fighting alone. As I walked away from the precinct, I turned back for a moment and looked at the officers who had tried to break me. They were standing there, watching me leave, probably wondering how it had all gone so wrong. But that wasn't my problem anymore. "Take care of yourself, Marcus," Justice Brown had said before hanging up. "And remember, the fight isn't over." I nodded silently. It wasn't over. But it had just begun. And I was ready for it.